Entonces para Jodi Halpern.
First of all, thank you to everyone who stayed till the very end of Friday. You are serious about these topics, and we so appreciate that. I'm going to speak with you today about the power of empathic curiosity in a divided world. Take a look at this picture. What do you see? Everyone think for yourself, what do you see in this picture? Before COVID-19, you would probably just see people on a bus. But of course, with COVID-19 and masking, one of the things we see that we never noticed before is that we all breathe the same air. And just as we all breathe the same air, we need to be aware that we also catch each other's moods, each other's feelings. Emotions are contagious, and we are not aware of how much this affects our society. Conflicts make us angry and defensive. Sympathy and compassion evaporate. They just go poof. Empathic curiosity, the cognitive part, gives us an alternative cognitive pathway. When we are angry or upset with another person, we're actually built to become curious about the source of our pain. We are evolutionarily built. When we're happy, through evolution, we don't become curious. We just eat and look at the sky. But in evolution, when we're in pain, we become very curious about our situation and what the cause of our pain is. When another person is the cause of our pain, we are naturally built to become curious and say, why are they doing this? Well, that is a superpower. You can take that power and actually ask them and try to find out, why are you doing this? And if the person sees that you are trying to understand them more accurately and not just pretending to listen, this is so powerful to de-escalate conflicts. 30-year-old Sam was blocking the door of his dying mother's room, her hospital room, and he was threatening to shoot the nurses if they went into her room to give her any more pain medication. Once we saw he wasn't actually going to shoot anyone right then, I could feel comfortable talking with him. And he told me that, and what I haven't told you is, I think I said his mother had metastatic cancer. So she was dying. She was at the end stage of dying from metastatic cancer. And she was in terrible pain. She needed the pain medication. But some of you know that at the end of life, when you get enough pain medication, it puts you to sleep, and she probably would never have been awake again after that. And so he said to me, I can't lose contact with her. If they give her the medication, I'll lose contact with my mother. And he was frantic, and he told me how he had not slept for days and how he had carried his mother's, she was very skinny at this point from cancer, he had physically carried her in his arms out of 2 other hospitals when they tried to give her sedating pain medication. And he said he just needed to have contact with her as long as possible. And I became curious because it was obvious to me that this was not a crazy man in general, and that he really loved his mother, and that his mother was in pain. And so I wondered, how serious is it for him that he can't let her have what she needs? So I said, what is it about losing contact with her that you can't face, that is unbearable to you? And as soon as he saw that I was genuinely curious, he immediately dropped his whole threatening attitude, and his shoulders slumped, and he started to cry. And he told me that about a year ago, right around the time his mother was diagnosed with cancer, he had gotten the job of his dreams far across the country, and he had chosen to move across the country and not see his mother because he believed that she would have a good outcome, or hoped she would have a good outcome from her cancer. And he found it unbearable that he had lost that year with her. And as he cried, he was calmer. We called his father. His father was an elderly man who was staying away because he was so threatened by the son. And the father and the son sat by the mother's bedside as we gave her the pain medication and she went to sleep. Experiences like this led me to study the power of empathic curiosity, wondering, what is the person doing? Why are they saying the things they're saying? And what power does that have in medical care? Doctors were not asking patients about their feelings, their thoughts, why they were doing what they were doing. This was in the late 90s, early 2000s, and doctors were not asking patients to really tell them anything about themselves. Doctors at that time thought that their job was to give orders. They tell patients what to do, patients are supposed to do it. There was really very little empathic curiosity. The effect of that on patients was that patients did not trust doctors. Because since the doctor, and I have to tell you that doctors were also literally believed that empathy would make them a bad doctor. First of all, they believed that, I talked about empathic curiosity, they thought I just meant feelings of empathy. And they said, if I feel empathy, I won't be objective and I'll burn out. So they were scared of the whole thing. And what they did instead is, in this very distanced way, tell patients what to do. So patients felt the doctors weren't really interested or curious about them, and the patients wouldn't ask the questions they needed to when the doctor told them complicated things and the patient didn't understand, when they told them to take medications the patients didn't want to take and they didn't understand. Patients didn't trust the doctor, so they didn't ask, and they didn't act authentically with the doctors. So they would leave the session with the doctor, and this is true across the US at this time, and 50% of what doctors recommended, 50%, half, would be thrown away the minute the patient left the doctor because of this lack of trust. So we began meeting with doctors in small groups to try to disrupt this cycle, this negative cycle. In the small groups, we first of all had curiosity about the doctors. We asked them, what is it that you want? Why are you coming to this small group? Do you realize, what do you find frustrating about being a doctor? And they told us it's frustrating that half of what I recommend isn't followed. And also, all these conflicts with patients. I don't know what to do. So we began to help them see that part of the conflicts and part of the mistrust was because they were making incorrect assumptions about their patients. And they became curious. The doctors became curious about why the patients weren't taking the medication. What did the patient think? What did the patient want to know? So they became curious. And they started deliberately listening more. Let me just ask you this. Which field of medicine do you think has the lowest level of burnout? Everybody think about that. If anybody wants to call it out, you can. Anybody else? Okay. All right. I think I heard a few good ideas, maybe very good ideas, but I was surprised, the field of medicine that has the lowest level of burnout is palliative care. Palliative care is the saddest field of medicine. It's patients who are dying, who are suffering, who have intractable pain. If burnout was to come from empathy, you would think it would happen there. The reason palliative care has the lowest level of burnout is because doctors who are palliative care specialists have the highest level of empathic curiosity. They have the most skills, cognitive skills, to think about and ask questions about and understand the precise motives and needs of each patient. And they use that to channel their emotional empathy. So we developed a model of this, which is if a doctor feels something like sympathy, empathy, just emotions with the patient, that does lead to burnout. But if they feel emotions like empathy, sympathy, resonance with the patient, but they use it to be curious about what the patient is experiencing, then they have something to do with their emotions that's very productive. We live in a time where we have histories of conflict, political upheaval, and yet the possibility of transformation. I became very interested in working with human rights workers where there was a high level of social conflict, but there was the possibility of social reconciliation. One of the first projects I worked on was in the former Yugoslavia. Some of you that are very young might not know that there was war in Yugoslavia from 1991 to 2001. 10 years of a terrible war in which Bosnian, Serbian, and Croatian people, neighbors, basically killed each other. And then, 2002, they had to live side by side. Impossible. And there's still conflicts today. There's no magic answer. But there were groups through the years that were able to build genuine social reconciliation, and we studied them. And one of the most successful groups was a group of mothers of sons who had been killed during the war, whose bodies were not located. So the mothers of the Serbian, Croatian, and Bosnian mothers had to go across each other's borders looking for the bodies of their sons. So they worked as a collective over several years. And because of the ethnic fighting, at beginning time, they hated each other, but had to help each other. But what happened is, as they spent so much time together, they started telling each other their stories. And they were very interested and curious about each other's lives. And eventually, they built real respect and comradeship. So, for example, two women that we interviewed, Marija and Dobrinka, told us how one of them said, Marija said about Dobrinka, "I don't always like her, but I respect her. And when she's in trouble, I support her." And we heard from other people that when they were in critical conflicts, these two always stood up for each other, and they built a memorial together. Returning to how can we improve our shared social world, we can cultivate empathic curiosity. We live with uncertainty. Today, so much uncertainty about what human beings are capable of, on the good side as well as the bad. Uncertainty holds potential for growth and change. This potential to be surprised is, to me, the most realistic form of hope. We need this special form of hope, not denying conflict, but appreciating the nearly limitless capacity each of us has for empathic curiosity. We can be surprised by the layers of meaning we had not noticed before in our own and each other's lives. We can find joy in the intertwining of our private feelings and our collective human endeavor. Thank you.
Jodi, I would like to invite you, Jodi.
It's all of us.